Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of our Justice and Pieces guest speaker series. So we're back here and really happy to have, you see their name on pretty much every textbook we have, Emond Publishing there. So I'm really happy to have Danann and Laura join us here today. And first of all, maybe thanks so much for joining us, Danann. Maybe you could start with you could tell me a little bit about yourself and your role at Emond.
Sure, no problem. Thanks for having us, JP. It's really fun to do this. So I've been in Emond now for about 9 years. So I'm the senior publisher. I look after all of the our professional lines, so basically all the books for practicing lawyers. That was my sort of my bailiwick from my days at LexisNexis. So I was there for about 12 years. And I was, started out developing as an acquisitions editor, developing titles for lawyers, and then I went into sort of management from there. And then eventually I decided to make a move because I wanted to be more kind of hands-on again, and I thought that Emond was a good sort of landing strip for that. So yeah, it's worked out really well. I did manage the law school line briefly for a while, and we're getting into the CPD business, so I also create some of those, again, for practicing lawyers. But it's been a fantastic ride.
Perfect. Thanks. And over to you, Laura.
Hey, so my name is Laura Bast. My job title at Emond is acquisitions editor. The difference between an acquisitions editor and a publisher is pretty much just one of seniority. So I've only been doing this job, like this role, for 3 years, but like soon maybe I might get promoted to publisher. That's my dream and hopes. But yeah, did you want me to talk a bit about like how I got into this and my career path?
Yeah, maybe let's discuss a little bit more about your background and how you got
Okay.
into this role.
So I also started at Emond about 9 years ago. I'm coming up on my 10th anniversary in 2024, which is wild to me because I don't feel that old, but I guess I am. That's like, and it's so funny because when I started at Emond, even though Emond's specialty is law and justice, the only person with a JD was Paul Emond, and he's like the founder. Like in '78, he was like, "We need casebooks," so he published casebooks. But when I started, there's like a team of us, and like no one has a law background, including me. My background is English, actually, and a lot of the editors, our background is English. Now I see us as like kind of a more mature company, and we have a bunch of people who are lawyers who manage the lawyer heavy products. But I'm actually like, I don't have a legal background. I think I know stuff about law because I read so much of our paralegal books, but like I don't. I know the lingo, but I couldn't stand up and defend myself in court. But anyway, so yeah, my background is English. Like my education is like English literature, which was just for funsies. And then I got out of I did an undergrad and a master's, and then what did I do? I was like a tutor proofreader kind of person for generally, it was often for international students who needed someone to help edit their papers, help edit, and really help write. But having that kind of freelance work, which I kind of just not made up, but it was pretty low key, is what let me get a job as an editor in Cape Breton, which is like, just in case you have international students, like this like part of Nova Scotia that's super remote. And there was a university press there, and they hired me as assistant editor. And so I got a ton, it was like a small city, very isolated, but like I got a ton of really good editing experience there. And so I think that's what let me get this job in Toronto. At Emond, and I started as like production coordinator, which is like a pretty entry level job, and I kind of worked my way up to what I am now, acquisitions editor, which is it's not really a typical path for publishing. Like often people who become editors like me start in sales, and I started in production, so it was a bit weird, but I did kind of sneak in some sales experience to get this current position that I have. So that's it. That's how I got here.
Now, Danann, I guess no, maybe you were one of the few from 9 years ago there that had the legal background. So, what kind of brought you into publishing from law school and beyond there? And any words for anyone who's thinking about that are practitioners? I'm sure you have so many ones either on the CPDs or who are thinking, hey, you know what, I have all these great ideas. I want to put something together, or even the professors, right, that would love to have their own material that they're teaching. What can you share from your journey to this role?
Yeah. Um, well, so I'm gonna Osgoode Hall grad 2002 call. I articled for sort of insurance defense boutique, which ironically now I'm developing titles in that area. So I'm, getting to know that bar pretty well. My articling experience, while it was at a top flight firm, I didn't exactly enjoy it, to be totally honest. And so I realized in pretty short order that the rigors of practice didn't really fit my personality very well. I didn't enjoy the antagonism and the stress and the long hours and all of the all the stuff that's kind of table stakes in the practice of law. It didn't really appeal to me, and so I decided that I was going to embark on a kind of law adjacent career. So I still wanted to use my law degree, and I still wanted to be involved with the law and be involved with lawyers, but do it in a different way. And legal publishing is such a great kind of it's a great place to go when you don't really know what to do with your law degree, but you still want to be involved with the law. It's got many advantages, some disadvantages too, but overall, it's been I have zero regrets. It's been an incredible experience, and I've had a pretty wide ranging experience in developing through my experience at LexisNexis and Emond. I've been able to develop titles in most areas of the law. I've been able to work with exceptionally brilliant authors. I've been able to sort of learn a lot about a wide variety of different areas of practice. I've been able to develop for students within law school. I've been able to develop for immigration consultants. So kind of a wide range of different markets. And so I've really appreciated that variety, but my love is definitely, creating products for lawyers, whether that be in print or digital or, various digital tools. That's what interests me the most. And Emond has just kind of allowed me to start with a blank slate, essentially, because we were essentially an academic publisher, and professional was always an area that they were interested in getting involved with, but I think there was some resistance to really kind of press the button. But they did, and it's it's been going really well, and it's a growth area for us, and one that I'm looking to rapidly expand, especially over the next few years.
Okay, so we'll come back to that, but I mean, before we go there, I mean, Laura, I wanted to know more about the repertoire, I guess, the catalog there. I mean, I know from teaching at various paralegal programs that the name Emond there is synonymous with the texts in the school. So maybe you could tell us a bit about some of the books and resources that are in store for paralegals and paralegal students, and I mean, maybe you can highlight anything that's in the pipeline that people can look forward to.
Yeah, happy to. I'd love to talk about that. But I do want to just say Danann, like, he explains what he does and he's like, I did this and I did that. But like what he did is amazing. Like when we hired him, I think I was hired like a year before him or a bit before. So I remember us hiring him, and like it was like, we're gonna produce this whole new division of books that didn't exist before. We only published textbooks. And so we're hiring this one guy, and from nothing, he's gonna make a whole series. And he did. Like, so he made this like amazing criminal law series is what he focused on for the first little while. And like it's won awards, it's got cited at higher levels of court, like it's very well respected. I sold his books in Quebec once, like because I speak French sort of. And yeah, people are so impressed with the work. So I'm always just like awed that, like, I was intimidated when I got the job. I'm like, oh my God, like how am I gonna, like, do I have to do that? Like make books from nothing? And the answer is yes. That is kind of what we do. We start with an idea and then, find authors who are experts and get them to write. But on the paralegal side, I was fortunate when it came to the role in having, there's all the books exist already pretty much, right? So we have had books for pretty much every course in the paralegal program for many, many years. And so really all I do is revise them. And that's really, and I can talk about that process. And I think there's some kind of interesting like background that students might want to know about that process, but I will answer your question, which is new stuff coming for paralegals. So yeah, there's a couple things. One that I published just this year, 2023, is the Legal Professional Career Guide. It's for paralegals, law clerks, immigration consultants, legal assistants, paralegals in other provinces. It's not just for Ontario paralegals, but the two authors do teach in Ontario paralegal programs. It's like a handbook. I wish I had a copy to show you, but it's basically there was this this kind of refrain coming from instructors and through instructors from students too, like just a need for a little bit more guidance around like just very first steps of your career. Like you're out of school. Okay, if you did a diploma program, it was 2 years. You might have come to us from high school. Like you just very basic like cover letter, resume. What kind of interview questions are you going to be asked when you interview for a legal job? You know, like, okay, yeah, you've had a job before. Like when I was an undergrad, I worked at Shoppers, but like it's not the same kind of interview, right? So that book we published this year, I'm really excited about because it like I don't know, I was when I did the book, I was trying to think like how can a book teach soft skills? Like how can a book be useful in this subject? I think it's a little bit harder than something like small claims where you need a reference book, right? You need to know how to fill out those forms, how to make, calculate like judgment interest and all that stuff. But something like interviewing, like you have to talk, right? So for that book, I created a bunch of flashcards basically where one side of the flashcard is like a question and the other side is suggested answers. So I wanted students who buy the book and get access to the flashcards to just like practice interviewing, like just practice those questions, like say them out loud to yourself, right? Like that kind of prep and practice. So I tried to kind of put that into a book. Yeah, that's the one I'm most excited about. I could go on, but I'm going to stop here and let you guide me to the next thing because I don't want to take up too much time.
Yes, we'll come back to you, and I guess and thanks there for a good segue there back to Danann, right? So maybe you could tell us more about some of those libraries, right? And that Emond is not just a resource there for textbooks. So we mentioned the criminal and immigration series there, but anything you're particularly working on right now for any practitioners that they can turn to for some resources from Emond?
For sure. First off, thank you, Laura, for your very nice comments. I really appreciate that. And Laura has been a star at Emond ever since she started. She rose the ranks in the production department and then moved over to acquisitions and has been a star there as well. So very, very talented colleague of mine, Laura. At any rate, in terms of the series, yeah, I focused heavily on the sort of the low-hanging fruit in the sense that I wanted to go after federally regulated areas to begin with, because it'd be a lot easier to not have to cover in depth all of the provincial nuances. So I focused on criminal and immigration. But after that, there's not really much else to go after that doesn't have some provincial legislation. So it's kind of inevitable. So it's a bit more of a wrinkle to get all of that nuance involved, but it's certainly doable. So what I've been working on chiefly this year is developing a personal injury law series and a wills and estate series, both of which I think would be more relevant for paralegal and law clerk markets. So we're looking to launch both of those series in 2025. And I've got highly esteemed general editors at the helm of each of those series. And I've been very happy with the authors that I've been able to commission so far, as well as the kind of the breadth of the topics that we're going after for the first wave. So I've got very high hopes for it, and I hope to be able to replicate some of the success that we've had in the criminal law series.
And I guess back to you, Laura, and I guess, and I'm going to come back to you, Danann, about the same thing. So what's sort of the process in a book? I think you were touching on this before. So, Danann's mentioning, 2025 is kind of when we're looking to have these out in the public. So when does the groundwork begin? Because, a question I always get, right, is if we're using, and I think actually in the last 2 years, there's been a lot of updates to a lot of the paralegal books. I mean, I think half of the courses, if not maybe more, since 2022 have new editions. So what's the process when, like, for example, in criminal law, I think the older book, the case of Jordan came out after the book was published, and everyone like, well, let's learn more about Jordan, but it's not in the textbook. But what's the process in terms of, I guess, maybe looking at it from an update, and then maybe over afterwards I can go in terms of a brand new book to go from an idea to on the shelves, both digitally and physically?
Yeah. Did you want me to? Yeah, that's a great question. So yeah, though there are two different things there, right? There's like real-time updates that are important for students and instructors to know, and then there's a new edition. So with updates, like if there's an important legislative update, like I said, I'm not a lawyer, so I do rely on my authors to tell me, and I kind of remind them, periodically, what are some of is there a legislative update? Is there a new case law that is relevant to your book? And all we do is put it like a Word file. So if you're a student, you will get an email from usually your prof saying there's an update to a case in this book and it's important, and here it is, right? And it's just a Word file, like, and it just refers, because we want students to still find the book useful and still be able to use the book. We don't want to like completely like switch it out or do a whole new edition just for one case, and then you have to buy a whole new book, even though really only like 1 page or 2 pages change. Like, we do wait until enough time has passed that we can do a meaningful update, a meaningful new edition, right? We don't just want to be like, 2 new pages and another $100. So yeah, so the updates are simple. Like, they're really simple. They just get posted on our website. So on wherever you buy the book, like on some of them, they don't all have updates. There's a tab, like employment law for paralegals right now is an update because something happened. I can't remember what, an ESA change right after that book was published. You go to the website, you download the Word file, and you got it. The new edition is different. Like a brand new edition from the ground, like from zero, where there's no, like when it's a first edition is what we call it, like Legal Professional Career Guide. That one I started right away in 2020 when I started this role. And so it took 3 years. But there's another book that I also started in around 2020, and it's not publishing until 2026, because sometimes it takes 6 years to find the right authors, get the right feedback. Like, we don't like to rush things because we really, like, I don't know, we take pride in the work we do and want to get it right. So even with a new edition, like, I'm not just like, hey, here's, we're doing a new edition, write me up a book, like, just, put the changes you want in it. That's not how I start with my authors. I start by asking a panel of instructors to review in detail. JP, you've done some of these for me, to review in detail the book. So the student feedback is something that I'd like more of, to be honest. And like, I have started asking instructors to like ask like a student to do a review for me. If you're a student and want to do a review, you can email me. But basically right now, it's the instructors who are telling me what's working about this book, what's not. Obviously, they always want it to be up to date, but like, I don't know, like, is it confusing in this part? Is there like a part of, a part of torts and contracts law that like students really don't understand and they need more concrete examples? This kind of like really detailed feedback comes through our instructors, and they will often pass on feedback that the student has. And we take that really seriously, and that kind of informs what goes into the new edition of the book. So it's a pretty thorough process.
And Danann, how about then so again, maybe you can use one of the series there that you built from scratch. Kind of, how does that go in terms of, well, you're not necessarily maybe as constrained of, well, what's the paralegal education, right? You're looking at, well, what do people want, right? And how do you kind of go from, an idea, let's say, personal injury now, right? That you thought, hey, this is an area that we can get into, to go from that idea to, in 2025, they're going to be books released to the public.
Yeah, well, like for the personal injury series example, I've got Barbara Leggett and Deborah Burlock as my journal editors, so it's plaintiff and defense side. And I think for me, the series approach has worked well because there's sort of economies of scale internally that, from a marketing perspective, you don't have to constantly build new lists to go after new groups. You can keep going back to the same market. So in that sense, it's easier for us to focus on particular areas. And in a sense, you're always kind of thinking, like, you're always kind of working years ahead, right? And so you have to kind of compartmentalize a bit. Like this year, I published a couple oneies, first editions within the criminal law series that I'm involved in. The marketing of. I actually attend the various conferences, and I sort of wear the sales hat as well. All of which I enjoy doing. It gives the job some variety, but at the same time, my head is actually deeply immersed now in the personal injury and wills state. So I have to both kind of service my recent publications, but even though all my efforts this year won't pay off for another few years, right? So it's interesting in that way. You have to be very patient and kind of focused on sort of the long game. In terms of the other advantage of having a series is that when you have general editors who can help me select topics, can help introduce me to the heavy hitters within that area of practice that might want to author, can direct me to which events are key. This is sort of a fast way for me to become embedded and become immersed within that area of practice, is to have those people who are going to kind of helm the ship for me. So I highly recommend this general editor approach. It makes life as a publisher a lot easier because you've got someone who already knows the area so well, who is already steeped in credibility, makes my job a lot easier and lets me get up to speed a lot faster.
And going back to you, Laura, I mean, maybe you can share some insights on working with some of your authors there. Again, you mentioned not having a legal background. So how does that kind of connect with making sure there are the updates you mentioned, or just the right what's a student going to take from a book, right? That sometimes, again, if it's written, you can have the same subject area, right? Let's say criminal law, right? That there's a series geared towards criminal practitioners. There might be books related for law school, even for police foundation students, and then the paralegal students. So kind of how do you work with the authors there to kind of come up with and I know you mentioned sort of getting the feedback from instructors and students, but what else is done in there in terms of getting it to the right audience that you're looking at in terms of connecting with them?
Yeah. The review feedback is huge. Like, that's our guiding star when we're doing a new edition. Like, we really, really listen to what instructors are saying. But the paralegal books are funny, right? Because the Law Society, sorry, oh God, what can I say that's like allowed? The Law Society is very hands-on on the paralegal program, right? Like I mean, I think they are on the law school side as well. I just don't really know that one as much, but like, they have specific learning outcomes that you need to teach as an instructor in your ethics class. They have specific learning outcomes that you need to learn in admin law. So at a very base level, we have to cover those. And that's like the first and foremost is like, that has to be the core of the textbook. Like, it all has to be there. So it is. Like, for example, students would know, but like in 2021, the Law Society added 3 new competencies for paralegals and lawyers, and they're related to working with Indigenous clients. So the Law Society like tacked those on to the ethics book, which already has like 44 outcomes that the instructor needs to cover. And like paralegal students, you have to learn like all these rules. Like, you basically have to memorize the rules, and it's like a big part of the P1 exam. And now you also have to learn the history of Indigenous people and reconciliation, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, also like what it means to work with Indigenous clients. Like, it's a huge amount of learning. So I I hired someone and we wrote kind of just like a chapter on the topic of the Indigenous competencies, because it was so important to like get that out as soon as possible. And that will be in the next edition of ethics. So for that, like, in terms of like making sure it caters to paralegal students, I mean, one advantage of me not having a law background is that I can read it with a fresh eye. I can read it like a student. I'm like, I don't know. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know about, like, I do know now because I've read enough that I'm sometimes catching, like, oh, this legislation, was updated, or this. I mean, generally I don't catch it, but the same, like, generally our authors are the expert, right? And so I'm like a second eye. And then the same thing with our editors. Like, we have a developmental editor who goes through the book once, and then we have a copy editor who goes through it again, and then we have a proofreader who goes through it again. We have an indexer who indexes. So like, it has a ton of eyes on it, and those eyes are not experts, right? So they're almost reading it from like a student perspective, and they're like, this isn't clear. Like, they have their student hat on. Like, the editors that we work with are so experienced in editing with the audience in mind. So yeah, you just kind of think about your audience, I think. And I think about paralegal students a lot.
Now, Danann, you mentioned again about some CPDs, right? That there's kind of going into that direction, and perhaps other things besides the um, personal injury series that you're looking to launch in the next couple of years. So maybe you could tell a bit more about kind of getting in that sphere, and what are some of the things. I know there was like an impaired driving one not too long ago, geared towards anyone wanting. I know I can't remember if it's Peter, I think, that one of the authors there of that book, and I think they did it. I remember I used to go to all these CPDs at the Law Society every December that they were involved with. And so maybe you could tell me a bit more about some of those things and what's kind of coming up in that direction.
Sure, I'd be happy to. One thing, just to dovetail with what Laura was saying, I think I can build on her point about when we review manuscripts and sort of what we're looking for. I use myself also as kind of a barometer of what of sort of how accessible the content is. So like, I've learned a little bit about criminal law with the series and in law school, but I'm very much a generalist. But I always encourage my authors to write very practically and clearly without overuse of legalese and no unnecessary complications. So I always look at it like, if I can fully understand this chapter and all of these concepts, then that's a really good indication that practicing criminal lawyers are not going to struggle at all. So I actually do use kind of my level of understanding to be a baseline. And if I'm struggling, then I'm going to assume that an early call in the first few years might also struggle with that content, and we need to make it more accessible. So, and in terms of CPDs, that's an area that we've very recently gotten into. There are, it's a bit of a crowded space. There are a fair amount of providers, Osgood Professional Development, Advocate Society, associations that are specific to areas of practice, like the Criminal Lawyers Association. The Law Society does a lot of CPDs, but we felt that we could add some unique value, and we do now have a good amount of credibility, especially in criminal law. So we thought that we would time CPDs around the publication of new editions. So that would not only help promote the new edition, and we bundle the book pricing with the cost of the CPD, but also I can recruit some of my authors from the series to speak. I also get to know new players within the criminal law space, which may eventually become authors. So it kind of has a lot of different advantages, I think, to my portfolio. And then, from my own perspective, I get to create these webinar events, which is, something I haven't done before, and something which I've enjoyed. Similar to I produce a few podcasts as well. We've got the Lawyers Lounge for the criminal law bar, and then a podcast called Welcome Home for the immigration law bar. And those are, we're trying to do something a little bit different and offer these markets free content that is hopefully really useful. And then, we promote our product. We have our commercials, or, our little ad reads and whatnot. But at the end of the day, we're actually trying to offer, we're trying to be partners, trusted partners with our clients, and not just a vendor, not like a faceless corporation. And some of our competitors, unfortunately are viewed that way. So we're trying to do something different and be able to offer additional value and not make people pay for everything. So that's the idea behind the podcasts. And with the CPDs, so far so good. We've my second one will actually be happening this coming Saturday. There's always stress with like live events, right? But it's been a fun experience, and so far they've been popular.
Yeah, can I jump in, JP?
Yeah, sure.
I wanted to say, Dana, the podcasts are really great. The criminal law one, especially, which is a bit older, so there's just more episodes. But one thing on the paralegal side, in terms of offering just good stuff instead of just textbooks, we just started publishing this thing called the Journal of Paralegal Access to Justice. So it actually predates Emond, and it's a project that was started and is still run by this guy named Bernie Aaron. Bernie is the coordinator of the Humber Paralegal Degree Program. It's one of only 2 Ontario paralegal degree programs. The other one's at Durham now, and it's brand new. So So yeah, Bernie's been running and editing this like journal for, I don't know, a long time. And now Emond publishes it, which is so exciting because it's so much more interesting than our textbooks. Like the textbooks are very important, but they can be a little dry, right? We try to make them as undry as possible by putting in tons of examples and figures and fun stories and the best case law ever. But at the end of the day, you need to learn, the paralegal rules of conduct and also the rules of the small claims court. I'm sorry, but you do. So this Journal of Access to Justice is so great. It's like, so I'm looking at the current edition. It's got articles in it like Man v. Machine, AI can enhance access to justice, or paralegals as legal engineers, experts in AI vetting, experience of disabled persons immigrating to Canada, rainbow refugees, LGBTQ refugees to Canada. Like, it's like spicy, it's like spicy content that's actually kind of interesting. Anyway, so I'm excited about this because it's got a ton of good stuff in it, and I'm just trying to think of ways to get it out there more. So I mean, the first way is just please go read it because it's really good. So basically, if you want an ebook version of it, you can just download it from our website. Like, you have to sign up on emond.ca, you like sign up for your account, and then you can just get it. If you want a print version, you can buy it from us, because I know there's some people who love to buy print. I'm one of them. I have tons of books, too many. Yeah, so you can also buy it. But yeah, that's one thing that I was excited about and wanted kind of to share.
Yeah, actually, I was going to just ask about that. The shift into digital versus print, and how does that affect publishing? Because I know, I mean, I just got a email, like some students bought like the second edition of the Intro to Law, which is missing actually. I think chapter 3. The third edition has the Indigenous stuff added into it. And a lot of them prefer the physical textbook because then you can kind of keep them for forever. And then others are, they like the search functions and all of the different things that come with Vital Source, right? Of having the digital book. So how do you kind of, or is there a process there? I mean, it's not as simple as just somebody scanning in, like the physical textbooks, right? So how does that relate, I guess, from your perspective of generating content now, keeping in mind that a significant portion of your audience is getting a digital version versus a physical version?
Do you want me to take that?
Yeah, I guess whoever, and then we'll go to the other one
Sure.
after.
I can start. In professional, the print to digital migration, which has been, talked about for a decade or more, hasn't really happened. And I think it's kind of surprised everyone. Like, everyone thought that by now that we would be, 50% digital sales, 50% print. And it hasn't worked out that way. It's been, it's 85% print, 20% digital. And I've read that in trade publishing, like at Indigo, Chapters, etc., it's about the same. It's always sub 20%. So this massive shift has kind of been a nothing burger to some extent. And maybe that will change. Maybe the newest generation will finally make this migration more of a reality. I feel like, we're at the point now where the technology is there to be able to create ebooks that are much different than their print counterpart. So not just a strict one-to-one replication, which is how most ebooks have been up until now. Now we can add a lot of embedded content and content that's unique to digital that will actually give it a whole new value proposition. I think that will help with this migration. And because up until now, most of the legal publishers have basically just done a straight replication of the print product, and that hasn't really lit the world on fire. But now we're starting to do more. And I think that will probably have an impact. But with lawyers, I think lawyers tend to be kind of old school and they want the print product. I know that pretty much all the publishers and most of the people who work at Emond prefer print products. I don't see a lot of Kindles kicking around, and so print is here to stay. It's not going anywhere. It'll just be a question of maybe digital gets another 5 to 10% over the next decade, but I don't see it getting that much more dramatic than that. That's my take.
Laura, is it any different for the students and the paralegals, or I mean, do you have kind of similar numbers as well? Because like I don't know, like I always assume that that the digital Danann pointed out would just be like a 50-50, right? Like either some people like pulling up their iPad or their Kindle or whatever and looking at the content, or some people just like having the physical book and they can mark it up. And is it different for paralegals, or is it the same?
So in the last couple of years, basically it's going in terms of textbooks, paralegal textbooks, it's 50-50. So 50% of you are buying an ebook and 50% of you are buying the print book. And I don't see that changing. Actually, there's like a slight preference for print in most of the books, but a lot of them are trending to like 50-50. And so one of Emond's things is to listen to that, right? And be like, some people want print and some people want digital and people want to choose. And I get it. Like, I also kind of want both. Like, sometimes I read an ebook that I'll have a print book at home because it's too heavy to take on TTC. But basically, okay, so in terms of me as a publisher, when I think about that, I'm like, okay, so you've got half the students in class have like their print book either with them in class or maybe it's at home because it's too heavy, and then half of them have an ebook. So I have to make those two products talk to each other. Like, the ebook has to have page numbers in it. So all over the Emond ebooks have a print page number, right? There's no pages in ebooks, or you can make the page whatever page you want, depending on your font size. But you need to know what's on page 23 of the print book, because that's what the prop's going to say. And that's just like the reference point. And so I think that's one of our strengths, that we have that flexibility. But the thing about an ebook is like what Danann was saying. It's like, what makes an ebook, what's like the benefit of having something electronic besides the fact that it's kind of light, like that it's not heavy, is like it can do other stuff. And so that's what I'm really excited about. Like, my ultimate dream for the Emond ebook is to have an app, like, or maybe we can do this in our own app, like, and it just needs to be like implemented, is like have an app that like students can use the stylus for on a iPad or like on like a tablet, because I see students doing that, like marking up a PDF reading that they got from their prof. They mark it up with like notes, because you still like, it's just like taking notes by hand is still like such a good way of like of memorizing things. Yeah, you can highlight stuff and you can like type your little notes in the margin of your like little ebook app, but like it's not the same as writing for some people, right? It's like all personal preference and different learning styles. And so I want to have like the ebook like kind of almost mimic that print feeling of like, this is a book and like this is your like main content, and then what else can we do in the digital space? And so that's like the next step for me. And so my latest tort and contract law book, if anyone's bought it, make sure that you open it up if it's print and check for that access code. If it's an ebook, go to your Emond account and you'll see you have access to this whole student site that I made that is like designed to be digital to accompany the book. So you still have your book, but now you have these like interactive videos where you like can go through a tort scenario and you hear from a client about like different elements of a tort, and you have to understand whether you have a tort or not. You have flashcards where you can like test yourself on glossary definitions. You have, I don't know, videos. There's like study tools and like a bunch of stuff. But I designed that to be like an extra thing that's like, what's good about digital, and then let's put that in on the student site and still have the book.
Yeah, and I think that's great there, certainly because there's more resources. I think that's the third edition, I believe.
Yeah.
If I remember, because torts goes at the beginning now versus contract, I think, in the second one. So that's how I'm able to distinguish it. But I mean, is there anything else there, Laura, about some other stuff for students that are listening in terms of getting the most out of their books that they may not know of? I mean, I think for some that they may not know, there's resources online that they can go to. I know certainly from an instructor perspective, there's tons of resources, obviously the slides, the test banks, things like that. But I mean, anything else that you can share with students who might be, hey, we buy all these books. Like, what else can I get out of it to really excel in school?
Yeah, sure. I mean, this is on my to-do list, but like to basically make a video about how to really use your textbook well. And so that will be coming, but you could also Google like how to read a textbook. And that sounds possibly silly, but like you don't read a textbook really the same way that you read a novel. Yeah, you can like you can read it cover to cover, but it's not going to be as effective as like kind of learning the structure of a chapter, because they're all structured in the same way. And they all have these kind of like hints and features to just help your brain more quickly digest content. So you want to pay attention to the headings. You want to scan the table of contents at the beginning, highlight or circle words where you're like, I have no idea what the hell that is. because that's something that you know you're going to need to memorize. And so when you get to that part of the chapter, like in, you know, and it's like some weird term like obiter dictum or whatever, like you need to, you need to know that because you don't already know that. So read the table of contents, like scan the headings, scan those figures, because anytime we put something in like a chart or a figure, it's because it's important and it's like an easily digestible thing. Say the things out loud to yourself, like just get all your senses working. Look at the review questions because before you read the chapter, because those are also highlighting like really, really important information. So basically, if you kind of scan all that stuff and get that all in your brain, then you can read and you already kind of have context for what you're reading.
Perfect. So as we wrap up here, Dana, maybe you could share anything you may want to add. I know there's a number of things that are coming up, as well as any words of wisdom you might have for anyone that's listening.
Well, you know, at the end of the day, over the next, 10, 15 years, I'm looking to develop in all major areas. So definitely personal injury and wills are next, but I'll be moving into other areas as well. I'd like to kind of capture the full field. We're always, as a company, Emond is always looking for new areas to go into. So new business ideas, new areas that are adjacent that we don't necessarily play right now. So kind of like the world right now, the world is our oyster a bit. Like we can decide where we want to play and when we want to play. But we're definitely focused on continuing to support our major growth areas. So professional is one of those. Our exam prep courses and a portfolio, that's also a growth area that we're investing in. So I think you can expect in coming years there'll be a lot of development in those areas. And generally, the fact that we are a small publisher, we're not a public company, we're not a multinational. We have the ability to kind of take chances. We have the ability to course correct and do all of that in pretty short order. So that is an advantage of being a small, nimble company, and that's one that we're an advantage that we're looking to kind of maximize going forward.
And anything you could share, and just thought of, when Laura brought up obiter dicta, it reminds me of the newspaper at Osgood that I used to write for many, many years ago. But anyone, who might be kind of listening to this and thinking, I'm not, they have actually at Osgood, I think probably still the alternative paths in law, right? That certainly they may be looking at law and they got this, $100,000 they've invested, and they're like, you know what? I like doing obiter dicta articles. I like doing things kind of, or maybe they have an undergrad degree in journalism or in English or something, and they think that's more my calling, but I still want to be involved in law. So anything you could share with them as they kind of think about what's next after they get through maybe their articles and along the same kind of path that you've taken.
Well, what I would say to that is that, there's a handful of legal publishing companies within Canada that you can work at. So those are great options. And there's also, with new technologies, and particularly with like AI and machine learning, there's a lot of new tech startups in the legal space that are looking for people who have law degrees and are interested in doing something different. So these are all fantastic opportunities. So right now, in terms of like timing of a law adjacent career, I don't think it could ever be better. And there's a lot more options now than there was even 5 or 6 years ago for people who want to stay in law but don't want to go through the rigors of practice.
And Laura, I guess the same couple of questions there for you. Anything you want to highlight there from the paralegal books or anything else that you're working on at Emond?
Yeah, so for there is one thing I didn't talk about, which I do want to plug because my colleague does a ton of work on it. We do sell exam prep stuff. So if you're writing the P1 exam, you can buy practice exams from us. I've been told that our practice exams are some of the hardest out there because you can buy practice exams from lots of people, and I think a lot of people do buy like more than one. So we have 4 that you can buy. You can buy all of them if you want to, but they're really good. So they're not just like take a test and like good luck. It gives you feedback. It's timed, so it kind of mimics like writing an actual exam. And if you get it wrong, it tells you like what to read further, I think. And my colleague does free consultation. So you can book like a meeting with him and just like pick his brain about like writing the P1 exam and like, I don't know, being a paralegal, right? Like he's amazing. He's so kind. And I don't think this is going to last forever, because as it gets more and more popular, people are like, oh my God, free hour. Yeah. So it's, he's like, I'm so tired, you know? So I think eventually we might have to either end that service or expand it to include more than just my colleague. And so I don't know how the quality, so it might not be forever. So I'm like, get on that now. Cause it's really, really awesome. And then in terms of career stuff, like, it's funny. I don't have the law background, so I haven't been on that path, but I do know that like, so for paralegals, you can obviously open your own practice or you can work in-house for a lawyer, but like there's a lot of like government work for paralegals, and like it might not look exactly how you picture it, right? Your career. And then the other thing I wanted to say is like, I feel like at that age or that stage where you're like deciding what you're going to do with the rest of your life, it's so scary and you don't really know because you haven't had the chance to do it. But I'm talking to myself when I say this stuff, but I do think that like on some level, you know what you need and you know what you're good at and you know what you like. You don't know everything, but like being able to kind of trust your gut feeling about whether this is right or that's right. And you don't have to throw out the entire profession of lawyering or paralegaling just because your internship, or if you're a lawyer, your article went bad, you know, because it will look different at every firm. Just like it's the trick is sorting out what the message is or what the lesson is that you learn, right, from your experience. But like, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, that's all I have to say.
Yeah, well said. Like if you're not enjoying practice, like there are other options. Like I meet so many lawyers that are actually, you know, it's revealed as I get to know them that they're not necessarily very happy where they're at. And sometimes it's a firm issue, but sometimes it's just a practice issue, and that it's not what they thought it would be. It's not what Hollywood told us it was, or whatever. And they want to do something else. And I think it's important for people, whether you're a lawyer or paralegal, to know that there are other options out there that you might find a lot of fun, and that you should pursue them. And you don't have to do it the way that you thought it was going to be, or the way that you know, law school taught you your life was going to map out. You know, there are other alternatives.
And apply for that job, especially if you're a woman and you're like, oh, am I qualified? You are. Apply. So with the paralegal, especially, there's a bit of confusion right around what is a paralegal, because they haven't been regulated that long. Like they've been regulated for a while in Ontario, but it's still new to the profession, right? So there are companies that are posting that they're looking for a paralegal when really they're kind of looking for a law clerk, or they're looking for a law clerk. But like the distinction between paralegal, law clerk, and legal assistant it's different at different firms. So you're graduating and you have paralegal, but it's not paralegal in the job title, it's legal assistant. Apply anyway. Like that's you can do that job.
It sounds like you guys just generated a couple of ideas for new books, right? Like what can you do with a law degree without practicing law? I mean, that would be a great book, right? I mean, all the different things that people have done out there, you know. So I thank both of you for taking the time for joining me here. Thanks for everyone for tuning in, and till next time. And again, quick shout out there to all the resources Emond has, from the textbooks to the stuff for practitioners, law schools, the Paralegal Compass, and this new what's the name of the new series that you just mentioned earlier that you acquired?
Personal injury series and a little series, and then we also have our podcast, The Lawyer's Lounge and Welcome Home.
Perfect. So all that there, I'll certainly share. And if anyone wants any further information, practice exams and prep for that as well. And thanks both of you. And thanks, Emond. Take care.
Thanks,
Thanks,
JP.
JP.